So that I think is a great thing that I need to focus on currently is what about the things that get you kicked out of the movement? Or if anything, can you even get kicked out of the movement? So the movement is for individual freedom. Basically, it's libertarianism. So libertarianism is, it doesn't matter as long as it's two consenting adults. I am so close to that. It's almost that. It's not quite libertarian. It's just a hair beyond it. It's no one should impose their will upon someone else. Everyone has individual freedom. I don't use the word adult because no one knows what that word means, and everyone thinks that they do, and that's where all the conflicts arise, because you'll have two people that adamantly claim that they both know exactly what a child is, and both of them are completely, at the very least, they're wrong in the sense that they don't have the definition, because there is no the definition of what a child is. So, I wish there was. I wish there was just a flat line that I could say, this is obviously the line in between the two, but there just isn't one. So I would say that someone would be imposing their will upon someone else if that someone else said, I don't want to do this, and then they got forced to do it. And I don't care if that's a child or an adult. I don't care if that's anybody. I don't care who it is. But if you're forcing someone else, and honestly, the other reason that I leave the distinctions out is because I also feel the same about animals. I don't think that animals should be treated as objects. I think they should be treated as people. But there's a lot of people that don't. There's a lot of humans that disagree about that too. So all of these questions have to kind of be tabled, but they are part of the debate that's internal inside the movement. Is that or is that not an imposition of will upon someone else? Well, it depends on what your definition is of a person. So, these distinctions, like I said, as far as like what your definition is of what a person is, of what consent is, and what an adult is, and what a child is, all these definitions are where the debates happen, but the whole thing ties together the idea of independence for every individual person, so that everybody has as much freedom as when they don't necessarily take freedom away from someone else. You can do anything that you want as long as you're allowing everyone else to do the same. You can have all the freedom that you want as long as you're not taking anyone else's freedom away, or your freedom ends where mine begins, or something like that. I forget how that saying goes. Your freedom ends where mine begins, or something like that. I can't remember how the saying goes, but people already know what that is, that concept. It's pretty simple. It's a pretty simple concept. And the reason that I say that I don't find this anywhere is because every time somebody talks to somebody else and they say, well, what do you think? Then they say, well, it's obvious that everybody should do it this way, the way that they would do it. But nobody says, well, I think that, I would do it this way, and I think that other people who agree with me should be able to group together to do it that way. But I don't think that everybody should do it that way. I think that everybody should be given their freedom of choice to do it however they want. I would do it this way, and I would want other people to do it this way too, but I can't force them. And I don't want to force them. I just want to assemble with other people who already agree with me into a community of like-minded people. No one says that. No one thinks about communities. They think about the entire world and everyone in it as if it was just their friends and their family and the immediate passersby that they run into the street every day on their way to work. And that's not the entire world and everything in it. That's your world. That's your little sphere, right? And that's valid and that's relevant. And that's what's closest to your heart. And that is what's most important. but it's not the only thing that's important. And it certainly isn't the same for everyone. Your world is not my world, is not his world or her world. No one has the same world. Everybody has their own world. And we are also sharing our world with each other. So if we're going to have everybody else on the planet, then we can't impose our will upon them, because then they can't really agree with us. That's not really consent, because it's force. If we do say that everybody should do it exactly the same way that I do it, regardless of what it is, then that's just a dictatorship. And everyone knows that, but everyone just does it anyway. And then they don't realize that's what they're doing. So this movement has a place, and it's actually really niche. It sounds generic. Oh yeah, everybody has the right to do whatever they want as long as they're not taking anybody else's freedom away to do the same thing. That's just libertarianism, isn't it? No, because libertarianism has a whole bunch of things that are applied to it that I don't necessarily agree with. For example, the idea that government should always be limited to the smallest amount possible. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that there are some scenarios in some areas where people who want more government should be allowed to have more government. I don't think that libertarianism should be imposed upon people who want more government. I think they should be allowed to have more government over there. But see, every time somebody asks that question, are you a libertarian? The way that someone answers it, it always sounds to me the same, is that they're making these blanket statements as if everyone in the world should follow this particular exact political structure just because that's the person's own preference. And the most striking one that I find it in is anarchism. And the reason that anarchism is so intolerant of every single political structure except itself is because it uses the strict definition. And what's really weird is that most people don't realize this, is that anarchism is the most conservative political viewpoint that you could possibly have. You cannot have a political view more conservative than anarchism, because it's so conservative that there isn't one. I mean, I don't know how. I guess it's technically not conservative because there is no government. Because you could just as easily argue it the other way, and you could say that it's the most liberal because it's the biggest government because everybody's a part of it. I guess you could say that too. But the definition of anarchism is that you have no statehood, which is, depending on how you define the term, a parasitic entity that feeds upon its population and usurps the power thereof and enslaves its population, which is, of course, the reason that anarchists are against it. And then, like I said, with libertarianism, it's a similar issue because they say the government should always be limited. And it's like, why should it always be limited? Well, because if it ever gets beyond the most conservative limit, then it'll become corrupted. And that's a slippery slope argument. It's not necessarily the case that every single time that you have an iota of power granted to any government anywhere on earth beyond your own personal preference, that it will automatically, become illegitimate and corrupt and totally intolerable to everybody that lives in there. It might be intolerable to you, to a person that doesn't believe that, or to a person, I guess I should say, to make it less antagonistic. Bob, it might be intolerant to Bob, but it isn't intolerant to Mary and Susan and Jack and Jill, who live in that government that has more political power than Bob would prefer. And people just don't take that into account because they have what I call a submodal paradigm, which means they think that the entire world is one singularity where everybody's the same, everybody's interchangeable, everybody wants what I want, everybody believes what I believe, or at least they should. And if they don't, then that's their problem and they have to deal with that. And it's like, well, yeah, as a little kid, that's fine because you're still learning and you're trying to figure yourself out, and that's where you should start. But at some point, you should move beyond that and start recognizing that there's other people out there. And those other people, they have their own beliefs, and they don't necessarily agree with you, and they shouldn't. So you can have your own belief and you can be right, but they can't be wrong. So you can say that you're right. You just can't say that they're wrong. Bob can say that his government is the right government for himself, but Bob has no right to say what government is right for anyone else but Bob. So that's what this movement is all about. And most people don't get that. That's something that is not usual. It's not common. Because when you ask someone what they believe in, they always answer it as if that's the only way that could be legitimate. And so if you do disagree with them, they usually consider that to be like a relationship ender. Like you can't really relate to this person anymore. Oh, they're evil a little bit. They're a little evil. They're a little fucked up. They're all kind of weird, Or you'll have a bunch of friends that all agree with you about everything that you care about. In which case you're going to have a small group of friends and they're going to be really tight knit, but you guys are also going to hate bash on like everybody else that isn't a part of your group. And you're going to be really intolerable as well as intolerant to anyone that disagrees with whatever your group is that you all assembled about. And that's really the definition of a gang. And that's basically the first step out from that is that, oh yeah, not everybody agrees with me. And then you lose your naivete and then you end up in, like I said, it doesn't necessarily have to be a gang, but a gang is a good example of what happens right after you gain the knowledge that there's other people that have other beliefs, is that you're going to have to fight them off. Now, that's the worst case scenario, bad example. A good example would be like a church where it's like, okay, yeah, we believe in what we believe in specifically, but we don't say that the other churches are necessarily wrong. We don't say that everybody that goes there is going to go to hell and only our church is going to go to heaven. We don't have that extreme of belief. We just believe in our own belief because it makes sense for us. And so we offer it to those who agree. And, we would love to convert and persuade people and talk to them all day long about why we think that we are right, because we want them to join us. But we, won't tell them that they're wrong and that they're going to go to hell just because they're Presbyterian and we're Methodist. You know what I mean? So that is what this movement is going to be about. And so people, when I anticipate that when people first hear about it, that they're going to think that it's just a libertarian movement, that therefore it's about, okay, legalize pot, legalize brothels. Okay, I get it. It's seedy and trashy and it's all maverick. And it's like, no, that's not necessarily the case. It's really more about tolerance. It's really more about like, I'm not going to impose my will upon you because I respect your difference with me. And it's really not Republican or Democrat. It's not even libertarian. It doesn't have that level of political structure to the movement. The movement is really just about not imposing your will on anyone else. The consequence of that very simple law is profound and it's counterintuitive, because what it means is that you have to recognize that there are not only other people that do disagree with you, but that you don't have to kill them in order to survive. You can coexist with those other people and you can recognize that they're not rival gangs. They are different musical genres. It's like rock versus country or something like that. It's not anything to get that excited about. It's just whichever side you happen to be on. And when you start looking at it that way, and it's difficult because you got to look at abortion versus pro-choice versus pro-life. You got to take that and turn it somehow into your head into rock versus country. And it's like, I don't know how to do that because it involves dead babies or not. It's either dead babies or it's raped women or it's like enslaved women or something like that. Either case is so fucking noxious that it's really difficult to look at it as rock versus country, but that's what this movement is about. It really seeks to tell people, yes, it's okay to believe in what you believe in, but you cannot overextend that and tell other people what they should be doing with their lives. You have to let them do what they're going to do. If they're a pro-life person, you have to let them be pro-life. You can't go and attack them. You can't beat them over the head with a bike lock. You can't rob them. You can't lie to them. You can't treat them like shit all day long and harass them. Basically, you can't treat them any differently than you would treat anyone else that is just neutral. that doesn't necessarily agree with you, but also doesn't necessarily disagree. That they're just outsiders, that are just strangers, that are just foreigner, random people. You treat them like any other random person, and okay, that's fine. And you also shouldn't be supremacist to the point where you think that your group is so much better than everyone else's that they don't deserve to exist. That's where you draw the line. You can advocate for your own position all day long. Like I said, technically speaking, you could be a white supremacist as long as you never raise your fist against someone else, as long as you're not robbing a black person, as long as you're not shooting anyone, as long as you're not raping anyone, as long as you're not, falsely arresting people or putting them in some weird jail cell. In short, as long as you're not imposing your will upon someone else, then you can believe whatever you want. You can say whatever you want. You can form whatever community that you want. I would allow that. If, in other words, as it stands presently, I believe that in the future, if there were white supremacists that decided that they wanted to join my movement, that I would allow them to do so. And if they wanted to build a white supremacist city and, congregate and assemble in that area for that purpose, I wouldn't have a problem with that. As long as they aren't attacking anyone, I don't care. If you just only ever want to let white people in, I don't care. You can have whatever rule you want at your entry gate, but you have to let anybody leave that they want to leave. And honestly, I almost want to go so far as to say that you can't even just exclude people randomly. I'm almost to that point. I don't know if I'm going to go to that point, but I do know that you have to let people leave. There is no system that I could ever envision having, even if it were something that, like I was just talking about, where it's like controversial, but I personally don't really care. I still wouldn't support it, because if it goes too far, if it starts making it so that people have to stay in, then I can't support it anymore. Because if you're keeping people in prison, that's automatically necessitating an imposition of will upon them. They have to be allowed to leave. Now, you can gatekeep, and you can say only white people are allowed in, or only black people are allowed in, or whatever group you want. Only those people are allowed in. Fine, that's great. That keeps people safe. It makes sure that people integrate properly. I have no problem with that. I encourage it. Definitely have secure borders and make sure that you know who's coming in the gate. But you let anybody who wants to leave exit. That's something I definitely agree on. You can bar whoever you want from entrance, but you don't ever bar someone from exiting. If they have a problem with your system, they need to be able to leave whenever they want with no consequence. That means that you don't tar and feather them and kick them out of town and then claim that that's still the same thing as letting them leave. No, they have rights. They need to be able to leave whenever they choose at their own pace, regardless. There is nothing that you can do to obstruct them from exiting. But you can obstruct people from entering. That's fine. As soon as they pass the gate, that's when it matters. It is when they pass through the boundaries, the outer limits, the peripheral line separating the group from anybody that's outside the group. And what will happen, I'm hoping, is that we're going to end up with lots of pockets of people. But like I said, this world is not very developed, so I don't know if that's going to happen. But ideally, that's what I would want to happen. I'd want white supremacists to make their crazy little groups, black supremacists to make their little groups, Jewish supremacists to make their little groups, capitalist supremacists to make their groups, communists, socialists. Everybody has their own group, and then they all agree not to kill each other, and then they have the same common rules, is that you just don't impose your will on anyone else, and then everybody's fine. But see how different that is from the way that it is now. Because nowadays you could say, oh, well, the United States is capitalist and Russia is communist or socialist, and North Korea is communist or socialist. But North Korea doesn't run anything like Russia. And those two are obviously, supposedly, the same political party and the same economic party, but yet they operate completely differently. So when you say that we already have that, I don't agree, because look at how vast Russia is. How difficult is it to get out of that country? Same thing with the United States. It's a pretty big country. It's not easy to exit. And the borders that they have are not secure. And they impose their will all the time on the populace. They levy taxes against the people's will. They use that tax money according to their own oligarchic will, irregardless of whatever the taxpayer says it should be spent on. And there's not really any oversight. There's not really any way for the public to even be informed as to where their tax money is going. Most people have no idea where their tax money goes. They know that it comes out of their paycheck, but they don't know what it's paying for. And that means that we have a government that is taxing us, but that is not representing us. And this is the same reason that the colonialists revolted against the British, was because they were getting taxed, but they weren't being represented. Well, that's where we are in the United States. So I would say, no, we are not in the scenario where the capitalists and the socialists and the communists all have their own little integrated groups. No. First of all, we're not integrated. All of our people are all over the place. You've got white supremacists living directly next door to black supremacists, who are living directly next door to capitalists, who live directly next door to communists. There's a mishmash all over the place, and that's what America's quote unquote known for. And it's disgusting. And I can't stand that. And so, yeah, there might be a far-right extremist flair in the movement. I don't know. But that's what I believe in. I believe that every integrated system should have its own borders, its own little area. And it shouldn't impose its will upon anyone else. And neighbors should be like-minded. So I guess that is, a quote-unquote far-right extremist view, as it's seen in the current political climate of present-day America. But I don't think that that's technically accurate. I think that that's just the way that it's portrayed right now. It wasn't portrayed like this in the past, and I believe that it won't be portrayed like this in the future either. So it just goes to show how warped and twisted the political climate is, that I have to call my system more closely aligned with the far right than it is the far left or the moderate, because in actuality, technically speaking, my movement is about as centrist as you could possibly get. It's just claiming that you shouldn't impose your will upon anyone else. It's pretty simple. But like I said, because of the weird, warped political climate of present-day America, it's going to come across as very controversial to say stuff like that, and then get into a conversation with people about what that actually means. Because, like I said, there's going to be somebody out there that claims that it's obvious and self-evident that you should let your child get child sexual reassignment surgery. And I'm going to say, no, it isn't obvious. And then they're going to think in their head that that means that I hate children and I hate trans people and that I hate somebody. And it's weird. It's like you're not allowed to hold a different position. The people have become so intolerant. And that's what my movement is against. It's against that intolerance. It's against that imposition of will upon other people. And basically what its tenet is that there is no universal, truth or law or perspective that is the best, that is the supreme. So everybody gets their own. Everybody gets their own equal validity. And that's the real main distinguishing feature of this movement versus any other movement. Because it's not just about racism. It's not just about sexism. It's not just about, gay rights and stuff like that. This isn't a single issue movement. This is a movement that is timeless, and it has something to do with the basic core of what it is to be a subject and have the freedom of will that we have. And to consider that freedom of will sacrosanct and that it should not be violated. And the only way that that could be true is if we group together like-minded people into assemblies, neighborhoods, parties, quarters, districts, whatever you want to call it, but contiguous where everybody in it agrees to follow by that cultural guideline, and that we have real cultural communities instead of this mishmash that is all over the place where everybody's living right next to everybody else. We need to have neighbors that agree with us so that we can form real communities that have very tight-knit groups where neighbors trust each other and they know what to expect, and they know how the people in their general community are going to interact with each other and behave, and what is to be expected from each other. That will lessen anxiety. It will increase friendliness. It will increase trust between people in the local community, and in my opinion, even beyond. Because if you have a trusting local community, your mind will already be at ease. You won't be irritated, and so then you'll believe that, yeah, there should be other people out there that are experiencing the same as me, that they also have safe communities where they can be friendly with their neighbors and expect like treatment. And so this movement is basically to say that no single vision is the right vision. There is no the truth. There is no the purpose. There is no the law. It should be contingent and dependent upon what the individuals within that population agree to. And if they don't agree, they should always be allowed to exit.